Can I just a point, Chair? Yeah, you mentioned Ponded Lice, and look how it emptied the room. The rain's not for you. Hey, we can now reconvene. And under item 6, the next item, there's item 2, and we're off to Ponta del Ice. And it's you again, Eileen, yeah?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Okay, this is an application seeking outline planning consent for the redevelopment of the former Tata Steelworks for up to 150 homes, open space, access points, and a network of internal roads and paths together with associated works. So all matters are reserved for subsequent approval, apart from the strategic access points to and from the site. So the application is reported to Planning Committee. It relates to development over 20 dwellings and exceeds development threshold set out in the Constitution. So there is an update sheet on this application, referring to a correction to the planning obligations to off-site playing pitch contributions. And also on page 212 of your report, where it clarifies education contribution, this is to Ysgol Bryn Iago, not to Penllygau Primary School. There is also additional information that has been circulated to yourselves, submitted by the applicant, and it's gone to yourselves and the Highway Department as well. Okay, so this slide shows the general location of the site in the context of the surrounding area and wider setting. Ponta del Ice is towards the western end of the county, and the application is generally to the northwest corner of the town. Next slide, please. So this is the counterpart aerial image showing the location of the site and the surroundings. It predominantly has an urban context near some industrial employment uses, but there are also residential areas nearby. Ponta del Ice railway station is to the south, and to the west boundary of the site, there's a railway line. Next slide, please. So here's a more detailed site location plan with an aerial image of the immediate area. It is a brownfield site where the original industrial use dates back to the late 19th century. It was last used by Tata Steel until late 2010, and then it became vacant. So these maps are a little bit outdated because the larger industrial type buildings have since been demolished. Next slide, please. So the site forms part of an allocation SDA in the local development plan. It is one of 12 strategic development areas in the LDP, and at the time of adoption, the SD sites would collectively aim to provide around 70% of the allocations for residential developments in the county during the plan period. Each SD policy outlines the placemaking principle and development requirements of the site and has a concept plan to indicate how these may be delivered. So the concept plan for SDA is shown on the slide. The allocation as a whole is owned by different people, and the site is subject to an application, which this now relates to a smaller proportion of SDA. And in geographical terms, it's mainly the 2 orange parcels and the dark blue parcel located on the western side of the colour-coded plan. So there is separate application before the authority which considers a much larger proportion of the SDA site. This application is undetermined. So across the entire SDA allocation, the purpose is for a comprehensive residential-led development of around 486 homes during the plan period, to include a primary school, leisure and recreation facilities, public open space, and appropriate community facilities, employment and commercial uses. Next slide, please. So looking solely at the application that's being considered today, the application is seeking outline planning consent for about 150 homes, open space, access point, internal roads and associated works. All matters are reserved for subsequent approval, apart from the strategic access points to and from the site. So on the left-hand side of this slide is the indicative master plan on how the internal components within and across the site might be developed. Much of those aspects of the scheme, such as specific details of the dwellings, are reserved for subsequent approval. But this is an indication of what could happen rather than what would happen if approval is given today. However, the strategic access points to and from the site is something which is to be agreed under this application. The plan on the right of the slide is similar to the one on the left, but it strips away some of the indicative detail to look closer on matters relating to access and movement. So the plan shows an access point via Woodville Street to the eastern boundary of the site, and then a second access point via High Street along the southern boundary of the site. These accesses have been circled on the plan and are considered to be the strategic accesses that are being considered for approval. The access of Woodville Street have been identified as an access for a spine street, and the access of High Street has been identified as a primary street. Members are made aware that this plan also has the potential to form another access into the industrial estate to the north, which links to the spine street. However, a key matter here is that the applicant doesn't own or control the land within the industrial estate. It does, however, provide the opportunity for the future continuation of the spine street to be delivered should the land become available. Next slide, please. So this is the plan showing the detailed design of the access off Woodville Street, forming part of the spine street. The architectural plan is on the left. An extract from the design and access statement specifically on this access is in the middle, and the general location of that access in the context of Woodville Street is on your right. Based on these, together with the information in the transport note, the intention is to provide a priority junction with a 6-metre wide carriageway and 2-metre footways on either side. Next slide, please. So these are photographs showing the area where the new access is to be formed. The photo in the centre looks at Woodville Street, is from Woodville Street, looking at the direction of the new access. The top left photo looks down Woodville Street to the south, and the top right photo looks up the street to the north. Next slide, please. So this is the plan showing the design detail of the access of High Street, forming part of the primary street. The architectural plan is on the right. The extract for the design access statement specifically on this access is top left, and then the general location of the access in the context of High Street is bottom there. So, in the context, based on these, together with the information in the transport note, the intention is to provide a priority junction with a 5.5 metre wide carriageway and 2-metre footways on either side. Next slide, please. So these are the photographs showing the area where the new access is to be formed, and this photo is in the centre, looks from High Street towards the direction of the new access. The top left photo looks down High Street to the west towards Station Road, and the top right photo looks up the street towards, in the east, towards Woodville Street. Next slide, please. So as mentioned earlier, some demolition works have already taken place, and here are some of the photographs of the site, with the left-hand side showing parts of the site prior to the demolition, and the right side showing post-demolition. Large parts of the site is overgrown with scrub and vegetation, with more established trees along the periphery. Some areas remain covered in hard standing. Next slide, please. Here are further photographs of how the site is currently. The top two photographs are taken from the northern parts of the site, in the vicinity of the industrial estate, and a group of dwellings off Woodville Street. The bottom two photographs are taken from the southern part of the site at Station Road and High Street, in the vicinity of one of the existing access points and looking towards the stone building that is left within the site. Next slide, please. So this slide shows how the site sits in the wider context of the town. Woodville Street and High Street, which are the two main streets skirting the site, connect to Station Road, which contains a railway station. Further to the south, Station Road connects to the traffic control junction at the A48 to Taylor Street, which provides connectivity to the town, the main bus station, or in the opposite direction towards Carmarthenshire. This slide shows some of the photographs of that junction. Simon will now take you through the remaining components of the presentation.
Thank you, Julian. Next slide, please. So just come back to the LDP concept plan. So in terms of the main issues, these relate to compliance with LDP policy SDA, as Aileen has mentioned, whether the proposals would accord with the development plan policies in relation to placemaking, residential amenity, highway safety, and the environment generally. The SDA concept plan for the policy indicates higher density in orange. The proposed development is intending to deliver this with a target density of 40 dwellings per hectare. The concept plan shows a cycle footpath traversing the site east to west. This is also proposed within the applicant's parameter plans. The employment community facilities indicated in dark blue on the concept plan are not proposed due to flood risk, and this is accepted in light of the detailed flood modelling information that's been submitted in support of the application. A new community use is now proposed on this land in the form of public open space and a local equipped area of play, and this is considered to be broadly supported by the policy. The indicative alignment of the spine street identified within the concept plan is along the western boundary adjacent to the railway line, thus diverting existing traffic and additional traffic from the new development away from the existing network. The reason justification within policy SDA notes that this would significantly improve the environmental quality of large residential areas in Ponta del Ice. Next slide, please. These are the various spine sheets. These are the various spine street options that were tested by the applicant, but were discounted due to flood risk, placemaking, and viability issues. This matter is considered in more detail within the report. It's concluded that the alignment shown in the parameters plans is the most logical to deliver the spine street requirement within the constraints of the applicant's ownership. Importantly, it would deliver the potential for a future connection through to the north should that land be available for redevelopment in the future. Next slide. In placemaking terms, the key requirements for this outline application is to ensure that the parameters plans submitted with the application provides an appropriate framework to guide the future reserved matters application. Placemaking aspects such as key frontages would be incorporated, shown in red and yellow bands on the slide. Connections within and outside the development and green corridors have all been addressed within the parameters plans to the satisfaction of the placemaking officer. An east-west green link is indicated connecting to the existing public right-of-way to the east. The spine street, which would effectively be an upgrade of Woodville Street, will provide a tree-lined street with an active travel route that would link to the station to the south. In terms of residential amenity, as no details of the location or design of the buildings are being approved at this stage, impacts cannot be fully considered. However, based on the illustrative master plan drawings, officers are satisfied that the development of up to 150 dwellings on the site can be achieved, having regard to amenity standards set out within the LDP's placemaking policy and SPG. In terms of noise and air quality, the application has been accompanied by an air quality assessment and noise assessment. The air quality assessment found that the development of the whole SDA site would have a marginal increase in sulfur dioxide and particulate matter. However, the impacts for both would be negligible upon receptors. In terms of noise impacts, the proximity to the railway line, road and adjacent industrial estate will result in the requirement for noise mitigation measures. The noise assessment considers this can be achieved through a design of the external fabric of the building. The Pollution Control Division have offered no objection subject to conditions in relation to dust mitigation measures to be secured through the KEMP, Construction Environmental Management Plan, and a condition relating to mitigation for noise intrusion to habitable room windows. Next slide, please. The site is within a sustainable location close to shops, services, schools and public transport. The development would include active travel routes through the site from the north to the south, east and west. Given this context, Short trips within the locality by future occupiers should be easily achievable via active travel. In acknowledgement of the anticipated increase in active travel in the vicinity of the site as a result of the development, contribution request for a safe and controlled crossing arrangement at Station Road, Water Street has been requested, amounting to £34,000. This crossing is broadly illustrated with a pink dot on the slide. This is in addition to a requirement for enhanced linkages via active travel improvements, indicated in green, along Station Road, creating a shared use path connecting to the rail station and extending further south. A contribution of £100,000 would be secured for this infrastructure as part of the application. Next slide, please. Turning to traffic impacts upon the local network, there have been extensive discussions between the local highway authority and the applicant's transport consultants to ensure the information submitted with the application provides a robust assessment of the impacts. The development would secure the long-term removal of HGV traffic from the existing site. However, it's acknowledged that this has been vacant since 2010. The proposals would result in an increase in vehicles on the local network. According to the transport statement, this would amount to an additional vehicle every 1 minute 25 seconds on the network during peak hours. The local highway authority notes that the junction modelling of the Water Street Station Road signal junction, shown in the slide, reveals significant issues with available queuing capacity. The local highway authority concludes that the proposed development would exacerbate these issues, leading to vehicle queues extending beyond the Escoyd mini roundabout, thereby impacting its performance and efficiency. The local highway authority consider there are no measures that could be installed to improve the efficiency of this junction. The overall conclusion of the local highway authority in relation to traffic impacts arising from the development is that it will lead to congestion and delays to the local area. However, the local highway authority consider these issues do not pose a highway safety risk. On this basis, these matters would not amount to a sustainable reason to refuse the application on highway safety grounds. Next slide, please. Matters relating to drainage and flooding have been fully considered within the report. Dŵr Cymru Welsh Water have requested conditions in relation to hydraulic modelling assessments for foul water and potable water supply, and these are necessary to ensure this infrastructure is in place to serve the development. While the Council's SAB department have objected to the indicative surface water drainage proposals, this would be considered in more detail through the SAB consent regime and the reserve matters details being worked up in more detail. As indicated earlier, the southern part of the site is at risk from flooding. The proposals therefore include land raising in order to create a flood-free development platform in the northern portion of the site. Public open space area in the southern part of the site would be subject to flooding, but this would not result in rapid inundation of this area and is therefore considered to be acceptable and in compliance with the technical guide within TAN 15. The slide shows the flood propagation in a 1 in 100 year flood event. It takes 1¼ hours for the park to flood, so this will give residents ample time to exit to higher ground and is considered to be acceptable. As a former industrial site dating back over a century, there will be contaminants in the ground, and this has been subject of both desk-based studies and intrusive site investigations. Should planning permission be granted, the applicant intends to remediate the site before passing it on to a house builder to progress the development. Therefore, the remediation strategy for the site is comprehensive and broadly will see the made ground on the site excavated and retested and reused where appropriate, or be removed off-site for disposal. A capping layer of clean imported soil will then be installed. Both NRW and the Council's Pollution Control Division are satisfied with the remediation approach, and it's recommended that this is secured by conditions. The Mining Remediation Authority, formerly the Coal Authority, have offered no objection on land instability grounds. Next slide, please. The site is adjacent to the Lucha Site of Importance for Nature Conservation. As such, there is the potential for impacts upon important species and habitats. Survey work has established there are bats within the standing stone buildings. This application does not include for the demolition of those buildings, and this will need to be applied for separately. The applicant is aware of this. The on-site pond and the important western green infrastructure corridor adjacent to the railway line would be retained and enhanced. Tree planting within the site would be required to compensate for any tree removals. Landscaping details would be agreed at the reserve matters stage. The remainder of the site comprises of large areas of semi-improved grassland, marked in yellow on the slide, areas of woodland, scattered trees, hard standing, scrub in the southern pond. There is a slow worm population on the site, and the ecologist has recommended a condition for a reptile mitigation strategy that would involve translocation to a suitable habitat. There are invasive species at the site, and a condition is recommended for their management. The site is hydrologically connected to the river Lucha via a pipe that runs under the railway line. Therefore, a link exists between the site and the Carmarthen Bay and Estuaries Special Area of Conservation. An appropriate assessment has been undertaken, and it's concluded that subject to the provision of a construction environmental management plan, which includes pollution prevention measures, the development is unlikely to impact upon the SAC. NRW agreed with the Council's appropriate assessment and have offered no objection to the application. Similarly, the Council's ecologist has offered no objection, subject to conditions. Overall, it's considered that the proposed development would not have a harmful impact upon the ecology of the area. The Council's archaeological advisors, HENEB, have requested conditions in relation to an archaeological watching brief for the works and the recording of the existing stone building prior to demolition. It's considered to be necessary for the local historic purposes, so that a record of the works that were once an important employer within the Ponta de Lais is recorded. On to Section 106 matters, the applicant has challenged the Council's request for a 20% affordable housing provision on site. And this has been subject to viability information that's been reviewed by the Council's appointed viability consultant. For the avoidance of doubt, the target percentage of 20% specified in policy SDA is subject to viability considerations, and the policy is clear in this respect. Separate to this, the LPA has reviewed the request from the Education Department for over £1 million for contributions to increase capacity at local schools. A full contribution of £166,000 is considered to be justified for the Welsh Medium Primary YGG Bryniago. But given rising surplus capacity at Ponta de Lais Primary and Ponta de Lais Comp, no contributions were considered necessary for these schools. The LPA also consider that a contribution of £100,000 towards the provision of a 3G pitch at Ponta de Lais Comp is justified that would be used for the school and the local community. The provision of this facility would also need to be funded partly by the Persimmon development on the remainder of the SDA site, should it be approved. As mentioned previously, there are also highway and active travel requirements associated with the development amounting to £134,000. All these requirements have been factored into the viability assessment, together with the requirement for the applicant to obtain a reasonable return for bringing the site forward. Importantly, as a brownfield site, there are high abnormal costs associated with the removal of existing buildings and the remediation of the site to make it fit for residential use. Having regard to this and the advice of the Council's viability consultant, the LPA has reached an agreed position that the previously mentioned Section 106 contributions would be secured with a reduced affordable housing contribution of 10% with a 50-50 split between social rented and intermediate homes. The Housing Department have not objected to this position. In reaching this on-balance conclusion, considerable weight has been given to the fact that the development would bring forward much-needed new homes on a vacant, allocated brownfield site within an inherently sustainable location. This is considered to tip the balance in favour of the development, having regard to the viability constraints on the site. So in conclusion, subject and conditions and the signing of a Section 106 agreement as detailed within the report and the update sheet, the application is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Very much, Simon. We have Mr. Capp, wish to address the committee with you 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Alan Carp. I'm a resident of Pontyddulais and I represent the Pontyddulais working group that was set up, hopefully, to arrive at well-informed and accurate representations at any consultation event like today. Will you excuse my throat, okay? I can't shake it off. Right?
Swing the mic around to you. Thank you. Now,
Okay. Right. So Pontyddulais is out in the sticks, okay? Up in the north, straddling the border between Swansea and Carmarthenshire. There are aspects of this development that are disturbing and I think scandalous. St. Tyler Street in Pontyddulais is a village street, okay, surrounded by what had become a town. That road carries on across the Lough Bridge, which is the county boundary, into Carmarthenshire, through Hendy, down Iscoed Road. And we come back to Iscoed Road, but Iscoed Road again is a village street surrounded by what has become a town. We come back to Iscoed Road. 7 years ago, at one of the public hearings during the independent examination of the LDP, I think it was in here, I challenged Arup, the principal consultant employed by Swansea Council. And I put to them, and I said, you have only assessed the Swansea side of this plan. You have not assessed what's going to happen in Carmarthenshire. They eventually admitted that that was the case. They knew they should have done it, but they didn't do it. You must ask them why not, okay? But they didn't do it. So I point out, I repeat that, they didn't. They didn't assess what is going to happen in Carmarthenshire. I told them that Iscoed Road is an old village street, etc., right? Which had become surrounded by a small town. Very narrow. Pinch points. M4 vehicles up and down. Okay? Higher HGV vehicles going up and down. And a big school. I told them, because I looked at it, I said, this development will block Iscoed Road and bring all of Pontyddulais to a standstill. And there's nothing really that can be done about it. So 7 years on, our transport experts in the Highways Department have looked at it again. So our consultants, and paraphrasing it, but this is what they've said. Page 167 on the officer's report. The development will block the A48, Trunk Road, and the A4 138 Iscoed Road at the county boundary with Carmarthenshire. There will be excessive queuing and delays on both sides of the county boundary and the bridge. Crucially, they say, it is not possible to do anything to improve the situation. So I repeat that. It's not possible to do anything to improve the situation. That's what our consultants say, Swansea consultants in highways. Frankly, it would be a scandal if you give permission for this development to go ahead in these circumstances. But Pontylice can't be looked at in isolation. It's part of a network. It feeds in to the road transport system in the rest of the county. Similar situations to this are developing across the network. So what's going wrong? Why is this happening? Wasn't supposed to happen. And the reason is that there are warnings in the LDP that have not been listened to. 7 years ago, Arab said, and I'm going to quote, "Without public transport enhancements, the impact will be significantly adverse in respect of delays, congestion, air quality, noise, and economic disbenefits. There will be unacceptable delays in journey times over 50%. So I'll read that again, okay? Without public transport enhancements.
Can you begin to wind up now, please, Mr.
Sorry, okay. But there'd be no enhancement, right? There aren't any enhancements. Therefore, over the last 6 years, major developments have been taking place, but there'd be no enhancements to public transport. So wittingly or unwittingly, you've been allowing large developments to take place, okay, which are probably going to ruin the well-being of future generations. So I think you should stop doing it. Finally, last thing, Spine Street. It would be a disgrace, right? Okay, and a scandal if you allowed a developer to pick and choose which way he wants the Spine Street to go. Our county councillors promised us that the way that the Spine Street was shown in the LDP would protect the town from excessive transport, particularly HGVs. So I would call on you, right, not to accept this application, and you should call for an inquiry or something, inquiry or investigation to bring out all of these issues, so we can all understand them. So most of what I'm saying is what other people have said, not what I'm saying. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I've got Meryl Lewis now then for the agent, sorry. Yeah, thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the Planning Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today regarding the outline planning application for the redevelopment of the former Tata Steelworks site, a brownfield site which has been vacant since 2010. The outline proposals relate to its redevelopment for up to 150 new homes, a green grid of new and improved open space and revised accesses. The adopted local development plan allocates this site, brownfield site, for residential development, recognising its potential to provide much needed housing in a sustainable manner. Redeveloping this site aligns with national and local planning objectives to prioritise brownfield regeneration, minimise urban sprawl and make efficient use of redundant land that has already been developed. Given the site's allocation in the LDP, the principle of residential development has already been established. This outline application aims to establish the broad parameters for its future development, which will be worked out in more detail at the reserve matter stage. We have worked closely with the various officers at the Council over the last 2 years, resulting in the positive recommendation made to this committee. To summarise the responses received on the outline application, there has been no objection from placemaking and strategic planning. Officers confirmed that the outline application, supported by the illustrative master plan, parameter plans and other technical reports, demonstrate a positive approach to placemaking through the aspiration to provide a people-centric, place-led development that is underpinned by the concept of sustainable living and connectivity with the existing community. Officers note that this is welcome and commended. No objection from highways. We do, however, wish to clarify the following points. Queue lengths, Station Road, A48, Water Street, Signal Control Junction. The local highways authority state that additional queuing is a direct result of increased traffic generated from the proposed development. However, when comparing the correct scenario in the same base year, 2029, there would be an increase in just one vehicle in the queue as a result of the development traffic. With regard to Water Street West, the nearside lane, the development traffic scenario in 2029 is forecast to increase queue length to 15 vehicles. This is an increase of just one vehicle in the queue on a lane that the LHA has stated already blocks back to Iscoed Road roundabout. This would be imperceptible and would not change the operation of the junction. This one additional vehicle does not cause the blocking back to Iscoed Road roundabout. The development traffic is not the cause of this blocking back, and the change in queue length is negligible. In terms of mover control, given that the Linsig model cannot fully replicate mover control, the junction will operate in a more efficient manner than shown in the model. The model outputs are therefore considered extremely robust, particularly in a future year scenario. The increase in queue length of just one vehicle should be considered in this context. The junction modelling outputs are already showing a negligible change in the operation of the junction as a result of the development traffic, and this is based on an overly robust model. The impacts of the development traffic could be lower still, with the additional spare capacity realised with the mover operation. We therefore do not accept the conclusion of the LHA that the model shows the development traffic to have a detrimental impact on the operation of the junction. The change in operation is negligible and would be imperceptible to existing users. There's no objection from pollution control, landscaping, ecology, subject to suitable conditions. Drainage, we note the drainage officer's objection. However, there is an existing Dŵr Cymru surface water drainage outlet from the site towards River Lycha. We have had meetings with Dŵr Cymru, and they are satisfied with the surface water from our proposed development to be discharged into their existing assets. The surface water from our development shall be attenuated in accordance with current guidelines, details of which could be addressed, considered and scrutinised as part of the Reserve Matters application. Park Service support the provision of open space and play space. Further details are to be agreed at the Reserve Matters stage, but the principles are accepted. No objection raised by Highways Officer for the provision of 10% affordable housing. No objection from NRW, Fire and Rescue Services, Coal Authority, HENEB and Network Rail. And the objections received from Pontarddulais Town Council and Llanelli Community Council relate to highways, community infrastructure and air quality. Highways, council officers have confirmed no objection to the development proposal, and as summarised earlier, additional vehicles as a result of the proposed development is negligible. Community infrastructure officers have concluded that the development would not result in such an increase in pressure upon local services to justify financial contribution to improve services. And an air quality assessment was submitted to support the application, and pollution control has confirmed that the proposals would not result in any significant air quality impacts within the locality. With regard to comments from residents, these matters have been considered by officers during the course of the application's determination and resulting in no objections being raised. Some of the matters raised, for example, design and scale of the proposed new housings, are matters to be addressed by the Reserve Matters application, should the application be granted today. We respectfully request that the Planning Committee approve this application, supporting the principle of the proposed development and allowing us to move forward with the detailed design work at the Reserve Matters stage. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Got the local member here as it happens. Councillor Downing.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm not against the development of this site. The only bad news for Walters is I worked there for 25 years and I'm sure I'm still on the clock. But with regards to the site, Mr. Capp went back 7 years, I'm going to go back 9. Sorry to disappoint you all, and we'll start from there. Because a lot of meetings took place between the local members and officers regarding this strategic site. I was one of the councillors at the time, and we spoke at length about a spine street, spine road, spine lane, whatever you want to call it. But we felt that the benefit for Pontarddulais was a road coming up Station Road around the strategic site and back to Glenny Road, which would make a circular road within Pontarddulais. Because if anybody knows Pontarddulais, once the motorway, something in the motorway, you can't move in Pontarddulais. Then everybody tries to go around every other road. And the only way round Pondylice at this moment in time is through a farm. So every time it happens, the farmer makes a few bob. So I'll take you back when we discussed this at length and what was put in the LDP. And I'm going to read it. It's in the report. Officer did touch with it, but I'm going to read it out in full. It says, due to highways infrastructure constraints north of the town centre, a new Spine Street will form an integral part of the development. The alignment of the street will facilitate the redirection of HGV movement away from the existing residential streets of Glenview Road and the network surrounding the comprehensive school. The Spine Street alignment from Glanford, but I don't want to go into that because that's another site. But then it comes through that onto Tinnabone Road, and the new link road can connect with the brownfield opportunities to the south, which is this application, before continuing its alignment southwards towards the town centre junction with St Tyler Street, not Water Street. So therefore, we had the concept plan, which was brought up on the board. I've highlighted it. You had little red dots on it, which is up there, so I don't know if anybody's seen it. But there's the site, there's the dotted lines, and there's it going down the west side. This is what we agreed to in the LDP. Why we've gone away from that, only the officers can explain that for us, because that's where my point is coming from. Is the Spine Street, which will be a massive plus to Pondylice, and that's what we are here for, is to look after our town. And officers agreed with us, which was fantastic at that particular time. There's a piece on the Spine Street in there which mentions what I just said here. But the most important bit is the strategic site will be required to develop a functional Spine Street, which I don't think this will do. Maybe highways can make their comments. And the other thing that really disappoints me, and would have the other councillor if he was still alive and still a councillor, when we met, was during the pre-application, when there was 3 options. Well, as far as I was concerned, and the LDP was concerned, there was 1 option. Never spoke to me as a councillor to say, this is what we're discussing. Shall we have a sit down or shall we talk about it? It's all right saying it's in the report. Have you seen the report? 30,000 words. And this particular pre-application was on page 39 or something of 60 of about 5 reports that you're trying to go through, as well as reading the zip wire as well, which got 70,000. So my only concern is the Spine Street, and I cannot support what's in front of us today with the Spine Street going up to Woodville Street. No officer mentioned the Woodville Street 7 years ago because it wasn't suitable. Why is it suitable now? Because if you're going to do what you're doing on the LDP, which is taking the HGV away from the comprehensive school, away from the built-up area on Glenhill Road, and coming up this road, then you're going to skirt the site, you're going to go up Woodville Street, then you're going to go back into the site. And then you're going to find another way once that road is completed. So this wasn't what we were looking for when we sat down with officers to discuss this. And the other thing that was mentioned in 2019, when we were sitting in here adopting the LDP, is when I asked if this would be looked at a whole, or can it be cherry picked? I'm sure there's other strategic sites where the word cherry picked has been mentioned, but to me this looks as if you are cherry picking because you're picking one part of a site and not discussing as a whole. Because this is not, to me, a spine road that's going to take HGV lorries away from a comprehensive school, which is what we wanted to do in principle. So pick the bones out of that. I'm not going to say nothing that Mr. Capp said, because I agree with him, because I drive that way most days when I'm coming into Swansea, and it's only going to get worse. Thank you, Chair.
Mine's nothing to do with roads. I just want an explanation, please. On page 173, where it says housing, and it says the housing needs was 20% on this site. Subject to viability. But I thought when we, again, did the LDP, I thought we put in certain things that were needed. And now there's an updated comment and says, no objections raised to 10% with a 50-50 split based on viability. And then lo and behold, on page 212 about planning obligations, you can tell it's getting late. It says the on-site provision is 50% social rented, 50% intermediate, and lo and behold, it's 10% on the site. And yet we're crying out for housing, for social housing. Who has said that it is okay to jump down from 20% to 10?
Right.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd like to touch as well on the issue around highways. As was said by colleagues, we adopted the LDP 2019 after going on very, very many visits, as you know, Chair, down to sites and that, and we bring together to adopt a plan. And I thought part of that proposal was for consultation with members, especially within physical developments within their own wards. So I beg to ask the question, one, as the officer's been out there recently, because to assess the situation regarding the issue of where the best place would be for the spine road, taking in consideration is obviously discussions were held previously, as Councillor Down said, 9 years ago, and the gentleman and to my left was 7 years ago. But of course, there have been other developments over that period of time in the village and the surrounding area, and obviously that would have created more traffic within the area and coming through the area. And secondly, as I say, I would urgently ask if perhaps we could look again at this development regarding the best position for the spine road with the highways colleagues, because the issue is you can't beat the local knowledge, and I'm sure the local knowledge is there with the local member who lived in the community for many, many years, and the constituency he actually represents. So I don't know whether that's acceptable, Chair. Perhaps if we can relook at this application to see if there is a way that we can look at which would be the best route if we got over Spine Road to ease the congestion with traffic within Pondidilis and the surrounding area. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I got no other hands up. No. Oh, sure. Oh, queries to respond.
Okay, thanks for the queries. So, I mean, coming back to the Spine Street, I mean, as we said in the report, the concept plan is a broad concept that's indicated. That there's text on the within the LDP to say it's subject to further sort of detailed design. Flooding as well is also mentioned in the footnote to the SDA plan, the concept plan. So this is a concept. And obviously, there's developer requirements, one of which is to deliver a spine street. So in submitting this application and designing this application, what the developer has tried to do is to accommodate the spine street requirement within the policy, but within the land ownership that they hold. We can't ask them to do any more on land that they don't hold. So we're tied in terms of what delivering the spine street on this parcel of land. And what we want to try and do is to ensure that within this land ownership, they can accommodate that requirement as far as they can. So in terms of the options that were looked at, Ian, are you able to put up slide 15, which showed the options that were considered? So there was 3 options that were considered. The first one was the Western Spine Street, which is broadly the alignment of the, as shown on the concept plan. So since the LDP was adopted and since the applicants bought the land, further detailed modelling assessment has been undertaken in terms of flood modelling. And what it's shown is that there is flooding within that part of the site, which goes up along that western boundary. And it's actually shown on one of the other slides that I was showing about the flooding on that area of land. So in terms of providing it on that western side, there's a flooding constraint. So it's accepted based on flood risk grounds that it wouldn't be acceptable to put it on that part of the site. So there's a change there between what we knew at the LDP stage and what we now know in terms of the detailed flood modelling that's been undertaken. So that's why the western Spine Street was discounted. In terms of the central Spine Street, now a Spine Street is normally a wider street with it's normally a tree-lined street with green infrastructure and active travel. So it's quite a wide street. It has additional infrastructure requirements. So looking at that central Spine Street, it was considered that the land take effectively for that would be too significant in terms of what would then be allowable for the developable area for housing. So it's reducing the amount that can be developed for housing on that site, having regard to the flooding issues as well. Because remember, that southern part of the site has already been discounted from housing because it's flooding. So on this whole site, you're losing that parcel in the southern part, but then having to put a Spine Street through the middle of the site is also resulting in a greater land take that's reducing the amount of housing that can be put on there. As we've sort of touched on in the report and in the presentation that we've done, viability is a key issue here on this brown site because of the need to remediate the site. So that is why that central Spine Street was discounted, because of the land take that it would require. And also in placemaking terms, having an excessively wide Spine Street just going right through the middle of the street was also a reason for discounting it. Which is why we then moved to the Eastern Spine Street, which is effectively the option that was initially put forward. It was just for a Spine Street along the existing Woodfield Street, so thereby utilising the existing carriageway, but then having a widened area with green infrastructure and active travel on that left-hand side of the road going in. So that seemed the most logical option to progress in terms of delivering a Spine Street. And Spine Street isn't just a travel route, it's supposed to be a place as well in terms of placemaking, a tree-lined street, benches, etc. So those are the reasons why, those are the options that were considered as part of the pre-application discussions. And it was felt that the Spine Street that was put forward was the most policy compliant, shall we say, in terms of what could be delivered on the site. And it allows for that future access to the north at some point in the future, should that land ever come forward for redevelopment, that could then link up to the wider site where Persimmon are proposing their application. So those are the options that were considered. Picking up on the point about affordable housing, as I said in the report, that the policy is clear that it's 20%, but that's the target, but it's subject to viability. And as we've said, on this brownfield site, we've had extensive discussions on viability, and the position we've reached is that 10% can be provided with the other developer requirements based on that mix of 50-50. And again, obviously, when the application, or when the site was considered at the LDP stage, we had high-level viability information. We now have much more information about the actual costings for redeveloping and remediating the site. So those feed in to provide a more sort of focused, a more detailed assessment of how the development can proceed based on those costings for remediating it. So that's how we've reached at the 10%. And as I said, because it's subject to viability issues, the housing department recognise that, and they accept that is okay. In terms of whether officers have visited the site, we certainly have. Aileen lives in that area, so he knows what those roads are like day to day. So yeah, we're aware of those issues going forward. So those are the options that were looked at. Matt or Gareth, I don't know whether you want to pick up on the sort of wider transport and highways issues that came out of the modelling assessment that was undertaken.
Thank you. Just picking up on the points of queuing and impacting on Iscoyd roundabout. It was documented in the transport statement there's certain scenarios where it does queue back to that roundabout. It's not to say that that happens all the time within the modelling presented by the applicant. It's only specific time periods, and it's during those peak hour periods as well, whereas I think considering outside those peak hour periods the impact's not as pronounced. It was just something that was documented within our consultation. It's worth documenting the factors of growth in the area plus the development. That is the impact on that local highway network, mainly because of the proximity of Iscoyd roundabout to the signal junction itself. There's always going to be a certain element of queuing back, which will have impact, granted, on our neighbouring authorities boundary to the A48 and Iscoyd Road itself. Yeah, so positive, only thing worth mentioning there. And on the point of mover, obviously it was disputed by the applicant, but so the point we're making is that during those rush hour periods, the junction's only got so much capacity within it in terms of the other approaches are running quite short green times already, and a lot of that green times go into the main road already in that instance. So there's limited capacity of what that mover junction can do in terms of optimization, in terms of looking at end of saturation, shutting that green off and running another side road. If those other side roads are already running minimums, there's limited fluctuation of what that junction can do to mitigate those queuing impacts. So during peak hour periods, movers' effectiveness is limited. Whereas if you look at mover over sort of extrapolating an average across sort of a daily period, yes, it is a more optimized method of control, but in those peak hour periods, it's got less capacity to do so.
If I can just add, Chair, Ian, is it possible to show the flooding slide on that? Now then, when the LDP went through examination, I wasn't part of the authority then, but it is a point in time, and it's based on the evidence that's available at that time, where an inspector then has to conduct the public inquiry, take all the observations and all the evidence and determine whether or not that plan is sound. Now then, that was back then, and we've tried our best in the report and through Simon's explanation to understand how things have evolved since that particular point. So I appreciate some of the views that the councillors mentioned and the objectors mentioned about the information in the lead up or the examination for the appeal. But things do change through better evidence or better along the way. And what you have on screen there is the flooding modelling that we have. And as Simon pointed out, it's difficult to deliver the concept plan as shown in the LDP based on some of the additional information and evidence that has come post LDP adoption. And that is something that we cannot set aside lightly, because we have to follow the evidence of what is available at the time we determine a planning application. I appreciate the evidence that was there at the time of the LDP, but we cannot sit in that time frame constantly. We've got to look at whatever evidence that has come forward. So I can understand how perhaps the local member or the local residents may see the concept plan as, it's down in plan, it's adopted, that's what we are intending to see. But we have to balance that with the evidence that we have right here, right now, based on everybody to see. And that plan does show the western end of it certainly is flooding quite significantly there. So it wouldn't be sensible to direct one of the key road infrastructures through that very much western point. So then it presents us, well, what are the other options that we can deliver? And Simon's mentioned about this. The Spine Street is a very, very wide road for it to deliver all the means of vehicles and to cater for all the green infrastructure and everything that goes with it, and the placemaking concept. Because we've got to realise as well, the inspector deliberately changed certain parts of the policy relating to SDA to make it, the spine road is not a bypass, it is meant to be a spine street which encompasses the placemaking concept. It has not only a transportation angle, but it also has a sense of place where people want to create as well. So when you factor that in, you will take a good chunk of the central portion of that site. And knowing when you're dealing with a site that has a lot of heavy industry for a best part of 100 years, that the local member is fully aware of, the cost of remediating that in order to bring forward some residential development, which when you look at it in a broader context, you are quite close to the town centre, you are close to a railway station, you are close to a bus station. There's £100,000 of active travel that's going into this as well. When you add all those things together, isn't this a place where you want residential to happen? So we have that in our mind as well when we're looking at all the evidence. And the report is quite honest. We're not shying away that, you know, it is a balanced judgment, but we have to look at our allocations. We allocated this for residential purpose, for residential development for a purpose, because of its sustainable credentials in that. And I appreciate that what the concept tram plan did try to aim back then, the report does make an acknowledgement of how that has evolved. So it's one of those really that I can just only explain how we've arrived to this point. The decision is obviously yours. There is a balanced report there which explains those issues, and we've tried to kind of give an explanation of how we've arrived to this point. Whether or not you agree with it or not, that is entitled to that's in your gift. But that's how we've seen how we've gone to this point. What the Spine Street does beyond the confines of this red line boundary is not something that we can deal with under this application. It's just whether or not you believe that it's done enough when you're considering how evidence has moved on from that point. So that is something, I guess, for you to determine. Going to matters of viability, I think it was mentioned. Again, viability is something that does evolve over time. You know, build cost goes up, costs of remediating, property values also goes up and down. And the ambitions for this site was to deliver 20%, but we cannot set aside the 20% on its own. We've got to look at it in the context of, again, do we want to see this site developed for residential? And if so, what can we justify in viability terms? Now then, I'm not a viability expert. That's why the council has employed somebody who is a viability expert to look at all the facts and figures to present us with a set of conclusions. Those conclusions have been summarised in the report, which again adds into the pot of the balanced judgment that you guys have got to make. So that really is where we are with it at the moment. And I appreciate it may not deliver some of what the member is looking at or some of the residents are, but that is the balanced view of where you are. And I just wanted to leave you with that really before you consider anything further. Thank you, Chair.
Very much. Councillor Tribe, then back to Councillor Downing, then Tom wants to come in to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I apologise beforehand in case I missed it, but has there been any examination of contamination of the proposed site, given its previous role? And as a comment, the thought of more traffic on St Tyler Street going through Pontlw up to Pentlager or right turning along Hendy fills me with dread. I visit both areas regularly. And between 8 and 10, you might as well take sandwiches with you. It's an absolute nightmare. But the contamination is the question I'd like to be answered, please. Thank you.
Yeah, so the applicants for this application, they're not intending to build housing on it. Their They are contamination remediation specialists. So the intention is if the planning permission is successful, to remediate the site, and then a house builder would take it forward to build the housing. So this application's been accompanied by a detailed assessment, more detailed than what we would normally have for most sites. So there's a full remediation strategy there, which has been reviewed by NRW, and it's been reviewed by our pollution control division, and they're satisfied with the remediation strategy that's being proposed. So the made ground there will be taken out, tested. That which can be reused on the site will be reused. Anything that's still heavily contaminated will be disposed of off-site, and then a clean cap will come in at a later date for it to be used for its intended residential use. So, yeah, to answer your question, there's been a very detailed remediation strategy put forward, and yeah, based on our responses from specialist consultees, we're satisfied it's acceptable.
Like, going back, Chair, I know I'm sticking with this. We decided when we adopted the LDP to take heavy goods vehicles away from one area and put it through this area, and that will take them away from Ponellice because they come down through the motorway, down to the Black Horse, and then they'll turn left exactly the same way as they went when Courtney Meadows was working, 100 lorries a day. And then they would go up the side and then go around. And that's what we were looking at the LDP. Now then, what I asked was, let's pretend that the road to the north has been finished, right? Because you're pretending it's not there. Let's pretend it's finished. Do you think that this spine street will then be functional? And that's why I say, you're going to have now these heavy goods. We worked it out. We had a planning application the other day from Macmillan's. I think we're talking about, I don't know, 15, 20 HGVs a day. So they'll be coming on this road. So do you think they would go up to Woodville Street, like I said, back into this site, and then back out to the site? Like, it'll be like a big S. Do you think, though, this road will be functional highways? And that's what I'm asking. They say they're going to be a functional road. What if it's not going to be a functional road? What are we doing here? Yeah. You know, you come to this meeting, you bring the LDP, which I couldn't because it's too heavy for me. I'm getting on now. I haven't got the muscles I had years ago. But it's in the cupboard in my house. And, you know, a lot of work went into the LDP, the same as the work is going into the LDP too. But when you come out with things to say, this is what we want to do to, I would say, make Ponellice safer. And that's why we came up with this plan to have this road. And that's why it was. But no, it'll never be done. The way we're going about it now, it'll never be done. So can you answer me, if this gets passed today and it gets carried out, will this road be a functional road for what we want? And I'm going to sleep now, Chair.
So in isolation, at the moment, it won't. But the applicant can only, we can only judge the applications that's come in at the time, and this time, and the applicant can only propose stuff that's within his land ownership. And everything that's outside of his land ownership, at this moment in time, we can't provide any judgment on because we don't know what's going to happen in the future.
Excuse me.
Only that, Chair. Only that, you know, this is what's been presented to us. The spine road is presented at a width which is acceptable within the ownership of the applicant, and we have to make a judgment based on that.
Tom, I can see you wanted to speak ahead. Did you want to contribute?
Thanks, Chair. The officers have responded comprehensively to most of the questions, and there was just one point raised on the notion of cherry picking parts of a strategic site, which I know is an important point, and it does come up on other major allocated sites we've got. You know, what happens when there are parts of that site that come forward for an application, and is that a reasonable thing to do? Well,
fundamentally, we are not in a position to ever require applications to only come forward for an entire site that's allocated on this kind of scale, because more often than not they are under different ownerships. We're not able to do that under the terms of the planning system, and it's not something that we should be doing either in terms of needing to deliver on sites. But the key test is when an application comes forward on parts of a site, does it in any way undermine or preclude or limit any aspirations that are in that policy for that site in that allocation from coming forward? And that's something for you to consider in determining this application and whenever this happens on a major site. So I don't think it's in terms of cherry picking. This is just a sizable chunk of a large site that's allocated in the plan. So it's perfectly right that it can come forward and be considered, but it's whether the elements within it that have been presented are satisfying as far as they can the delivery of the development requirements that are set out in the policy. And you've heard from the officers as to how within the limits of the land ownerships and the control that this applicant has got, then they've sought to deliver on those requirements as far as is viable, financially viable. And that's just the only other point I wanted to make, really, in terms of the financial viability side of things, that the level of analysis that's been done by officers with the appointed sort of experts and the consultant partners that we work with to work with the applicant to make sure that we've got the fullest of detailed information to make a judgment on this viability. That's been very significant, and it's taken a lot of work to get to that point. It hasn't been a matter of the planning authority just accepting the word of the applicant, or even of just having some recommendations from a consultant that we're not understanding the details of. We've been very close to it as officers, and we fully understood and have recognised that this is a specific a case that does have abnormal costs associated with it, which has led to a reduction in what we would normally target for the levels of affordable housing. So I just wanted to make that clear, really, Chair.
Okay, I got no other hands up to speak. So anyway, the recommendation before us there is to approve. So we can take that vote now, please.
Councillor Meyer-Baker.
Approve.
Bill Downing.
Against.
Mary Jones.
For.
Mike Lewis. Nicola Matthews. Mark Tribe.
Against.
Mike White.
For.
Andrew Williams.
For.
Paul Lloyd. That's 7-4-2 against, Chair, so it's carried.
Oh, our
Thank you, Chair. There we go. Presentation. So, application property is T Gwalia, also to be renamed T Menin site. Which there we go. There's the overhead street view Google image. You probably know the building. Obviously, it's the pale building next to the Coppergate student housing block. And then you've got the YMCA building to the left, which is listed, and the Northampton Lane car park to the rear of the site. The building itself was formerly occupied by Erin Rees Butter Factory and subsequently operated as the House of Kent department store before being developed as an office block in the early 90s. So it was occupied until 2020 by Pobble, and they've now relocated to the Enterprise Park. So if you go on to the next slide, Ian, please. So yeah, that shows obviously the red line, but that just shows actually that whilst it looks like one block, originally it was in different ownerships and it's been amalgamated into one building. And you can see the different historic ownerships, if you like, or the different uses of the previous use. And the next slide then, let's go on to it. Okay, so ground floor plan. So I'll just briefly describe the development. So it's the key elements, basically part retention of the structurally sound building and the later extension, which will be accommodate the residential units with some commercial ground floor units. They're going to demolish and rebuild the structurally compromised garage building on the northwest corner of the site, and that's to be replaced by a 6-story residential block. And then you're going to have 2 additional residential stories of residential accommodation on the main building, and 3 stories across the replacement garage building, which is across the back of the site. And as I say, it's got 3 commercial ground floor units. So the existing entrance will be retained for pedestrian access. The sort of beige units at the back are 2 residential units, and then the commercial units aren't quite very well defined, but it's basically the unit to the right and the 2 units to the left of the site. And then you've got a bike store, bin store, and then the basement ramp basically comes from the rear of the site on Northampton Lane. That's the one, yeah. So next slide, please, Ian. And then just to reiterate the proposal, so effectively what they're trying to achieve is accommodation on the upper floor. This is basically the first floor plan, just to show you exactly what's happening. So we've got residential around the perimeter of the blocks, and then they will gain access through a central atrium courtyard type development, which will obviously be a communal access to the development. So next slide, please, Ian, I think. Oh, sorry, should go back a minute, sorry. So just to reiterate what the proposal is for, provision of a green roof associated works, solar PV with internal green wall within the atrium, which would be quite interesting. Total of 48 residential apartments, 100% affordable housing, available for social rent. The applicant is Coastal Housing or Beacon Housing, as they now known. As I say, the apartments will be arranged around the central lobby area within the facade of the building and extends the full height of the building. So you've got the glazed louver on the front elevation there, providing natural light into that central atrium, which should be quite interesting. Lobby provide lift and stair access from the ground floor, obviously, to the upper floors. So that obviously it's a sustainable city centre development, good levels of public transport within easy walking distance, car-free development, cycle parking, obviously, which will compensate. And as I say, because it's quite a large building footprint, obviously, so this is quite an interesting proposal to account for that by creating the central atrium space. And this is considered to be a logical response to the constraint of the building footprint and gives the opportunity to provide dual aspect flats, which creates an internal communal areas for the residents. And as I say, it's got full height glazing along the south elevation. So on the next slide then, please, Ian. Okay, so the top image, obviously, that's the front elevation overlooking the Kingsway. So obviously that's the building as is. So obviously the coloured, the beige, if you like, is the rooftop extension. So obviously it's changing from 3-story to a 4-story on the front. Or it's 5-story actually. There's 2 floors on that. There's one just behind the parapet, which you can't quite see. And if we go on to the next one. So obviously that's the image from YMCA building from the west, if you like. So obviously you can see the existing elevation. The building to the northwest corner has been demolished, and you can see the 6-story tower, which will replace it. And then you can see a better idea of the height of the rooftop elevation. And then obviously that sort of roof element is the louver, which will provide natural light down into the atrium. And the last image of the elevation, there we go. So that's the rear elevation overlooking from Northampton Lane. So you can see, as I say, the building to the right to be demolished. You can see the 6-story element. and then the 3-story element, which is across the back as well. And then we may as well keep going on these images because we got some, so that shows the green infrastructure on the roof, and obviously the blue is the solar panels, and then behind that the grey element, obviously, as I say, is that natural louver which will provide the light down into the middle of the building. And if you wade through them, Ian, please. So obviously that's the Kingsway before, after, and there's a few of these, so from different views. Yeah, there we go. And the last one as well. There we are, Northampton Lane. Okay. So that's the scheme. So essentially, obviously, it's located in the city centre strategic development site, supports mixed-use redevelopment proposals, and therefore aligns with regeneration strategy for the LDP. Also aligns with the Swansea Central Area Regeneration Framework, referred to as a SCARF. Areas for working, living, learning, reuse of buildings, sets out a clear strategy to facilitate new residential uses, increased amounts of city living, and thereby complementing ongoing objectives for regeneration of the city centre. I did mention it was previously used as an office block. Obviously, it's been vacant for 5 years since Pobble vacated it. There's a policy in the LDP RC12, which basically you need to justify the alternative use of office accommodation within the city centre. They've done that essentially, basically, since there's been vacant. There was actually a consent, I don't know if you recall, back in 2002 to demolish the building because it had gone into a dreadful state, lack of maintenance. So it's been rescued, obviously, by Coastal, so obviously that's a good thing. I've been in the building and it's a dreadful state. There's lots of water ingress, lots of lack of maintenance. It's a very poor state of repair. They've submitted a market demand assessment for the office accommodation, which obviously is a very poor quality. And basically, they say that there's no demand for it. The other issue which they highlight, which is quite interesting, is that because in the city centre, we've developed, or in the process developing, quite high-profile grade A office accommodation, 71, 72 the Kingsway, for example. There's office accommodation being developed in the Hasty development, the new Princess Way development with Morganstone. So basically, that's taken up the new demand for office accommodation. So in this current predicament, there's no use for offices. So obviously, it's been bought with an alternative use in mind, and therefore, I think in terms of the policy, it's completely justified. So in placemaking terms, going back to the SCARF document, key placemaking principles are in terms of adding scale to existing buildings, encouraging design solutions for at least 4 stories to implement with complementary uses, trying to keep active frontages wherever we can. Obviously, it's got some commercial space to it. Obviously, the entrance in itself is an active frontage as well. Encourage new uses which generates and attracts pedestrian movements. Obviously, the residential city living will do that. So the proposal to convert the office building is in accordance with our policy, aligns the SCARF regeneration strategy, and that also is supported in that context. Issues of residential amenity have been considered. There's been a noise impact assessment, so obviously the windows will be designed accordingly. All units will be designed to Welsh Government's design quality DQR standards. Obviously, it's been funded by Social Housing Grant, and obviously it's been delivered by Coastal Housings, which needs to conform to their standard, and in doing so refers to our residential design guides as well. As I say, there's no parking provision. It's car-free development, but it's on the edge of the city core. So therefore, developments like this are encouraged, obviously, without parking provision, and that aligns with the policy guidance with Future Wales, PPW, and the SCARF to relaxation of parking standards for regeneration initiatives to encourage use of upper floors for residential accommodation. In compensation for this, there is a 106 requirement, 27, nearly 28,000 for funding towards active travel measures EV charging facilities as well would be on the street effectively. As I say, it's got good bike storage provision, bin storage from the rear lane, mentioned the green infrastructure. So basically, yeah, so it's all in accordance, good development in accordance with a SCARF document and LDP policy, and it's recommended for approval.
Thank you very much, David. Always a thorough report. Yeah, go ahead.
I got two, but the first one, you mentioned the green roof, but I thought you also mentioned a green wall. Couldn't find it in the report, but that's not surprising after what we've had to read. Who's going to be responsible for the maintenance? And you've just mentioned my favourite topic, EV charging points. Sorry, Matt. And you said, but it's a car-free building, so is it to go towards our overall capacity for? Because we can't put them on the street unless we've got the parking spaces to put them on the street.
Green infrastructure, so the maintenance will be responsibility of the owner, Coastal Housing. Green wall is inside the building. So effectively, when we got the atrium, they'll put a green wall inside it. So it'll be quite, well, it'll be maintained obviously as a, well, the appropriate planting and maintenance education, whatever it needs to be done. Certainly, yeah, it'll be planting effectively, won't it? Yeah. So, yeah, EV charging is basically for on-street parking, effectively. Yeah, yeah. And there will be. I know you mentioned it before as well. They've mentioned actually that there'll be EV charging for the bicycles as well. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thanks, David. Yeah, one point. Will there be anything written within the tenancy agreement for this development? Because regarding cars, because as you know, we've been here before a few times where even though conditions are put in place, it's not properly policed or enforced. Because the issues might affect the adjoining streets, Nicholl Street and around that way, Page Street.
I don't have knowledge of the tenancy agreements, whether obviously that's a matter for Coastal, but I think in terms of us enforcing such a tenancy agreement, it's very difficult to do that, and as case law is established that you can't stop somebody bringing or parking a car outside the site. You can try and restrict parking in the site, which land they can control, but you can't basically stop somebody parking a mile away, half a mile away if they want to own a car. But as a social housing, they'll probably encourage people without cars in this location, I would have thought.
You, Dave. No other hands up to speak? No? You see the recommendation before us is to approve. So we'll take that vote then. Thanks, Gareth.
Councillor Meyer-Baker. Got your mic on, Councillor Tribe, sorry.
Mine's on.
Michael, please.
For.
Phil Downing.
For.
Mary Jones.
For.
Mike Lewis.
For.
Nicola Matthews.
For.
Mark Tribe.
For.
Mike White.
For.
Andrew Williams.
For.
And Paul Lloyd.
For.
That's unanimous, Chair. 9-4.
Very much.
The next item.
Yeah, let's get it.
The next item, I've got another meeting starting in 15 minutes.
Oh, just let's get
I'm
it.
going to get a bag of chips and if you can talk.
Go ahead. Go and do it.
I'm not running.